So there are those seasons where you kind of weigh the negatives, the pros and the cons, and you take it. We don't want to say that screens are terrible. If you're using them in your home in a way that serves you, that's incredible. What we found is that they were not serving us in our home, and that's why we decided to make these changes.
Hey you guys, it's Elisha and Katie from NowThatWe'reAFamily.com, and today we're going to be telling you about how we have become a screen-free family and what that means to us and why being united on this vision is so important.
Yeah, we also want to just encourage you on how we do it, because I think sometimes that can sound like a great idea and then we go to implement it and we're like, okay, I really need some rest in my life. I think some of the main reasons we use screens are for rest, stay-at-home moms, or just moms in general, educational purposes for our kids, and then entertainment. So how do we swap those out? In a lot of ways, we accidentally became a screen-free family because we started focusing on all these things that we really wanted to add to our home. And without trying to completely nix screens, we realized that we no longer had time for screens and we no longer wanted to spend our precious time on screens.
Entertainment, rest, education, those are things that we still want in our lives. We became pretty much entirely screen-free almost accidentally because we were using different things to serve us in areas of rest and education and entertainment. And I think that's kind of the vision we want to give for you. We don't want to use this time to be just a beat up on screens and just eliminate these things from your home because they're terrible and they're evil. We're hoping that you can get a similar vision as to what we've gotten and how much life there is to be lived when you go and you pursue it. Sometimes it takes more creativity, it takes more nuance, it takes sometimes slightly more effort to get going, but over time you actually get to end up living so much more life, and it enhances your education, it enhances your rest, and it can actually be even more entertaining.
Actually, I think screens oftentimes backfire where they sell this promise of rest. And what I noticed in our home was that, yeah, it would buy me 20 or 30 minutes of quiet time, where usually I would like scroll on my phone for 15 minutes of that time and then be like, oh yeah, I was gonna do the dishes. But not only did it do that, but then as soon as I turned it off, my kids were wired, they were grumpy, they wanted to know why they couldn't watch more screen time, their creativity was shot, they couldn't figure out what to do next, so now I'm having to come up with something for them to do. And I was like, I just created more work for myself. And I think that's something that people don't realize when it comes to screens. Often we can be like, oh, it's kind of like, we try to justify them because we want the rest that comes from them, and I've been there. But then I started realizing, like, wait a second, in a lot of ways screens are an empty promise. And it's kind of the same thing with education. I was reading an article on how children retain so little when they're actually watching it versus reading it or listening to someone read it. And I thought, wow, that's so crazy. In so many ways, I thought I was doing my children this awesome service by having them watch all these things, watch all these documentaries and all that. And sure, that's going to be a part of our homeschool at some point. But for right now, having books and using that for our education has helped so much with my children's attention and also with my own as well.
Yeah, and as we've already alluded to, we are not anti-screens, and there's probably going to become points in the future where our children will be using different resources that can be found online, utilizing a screen. And obviously, Katie and I both work online. I work using a screen regularly throughout the day. I spend many hours using a screen, and Katie and I both find helpful resources online utilizing a screen. But when we say we've become screen-free, we're really talking about family time. We're talking about our children and what's taking place in our home in those family hours. Because I think there's so much potential for there to be a culture built, for there to be education, for relationships really strengthened in those family hours when you're at home, before breakfast, after dinner, midday when you're all together. And I think that away from the screen is the best time to build into those relationships.
Basically, we want to give you guys a few examples of what we do in our screen-free time, but before we do that, I just want to say, what does screen-free mean to us? It's really been about 6 months. Up until June, I was still using a lot of slower paced but still online resources for education and for quiet times for our kiddos. I'd say we were doing family movie nights 5 nights a week, kind of before summer started. And from June until now, Alexa and I don't have smartphones, so that's something that's been the case for this last year, and that's something that's really helped me get off screens, which has been super helpful, and be present for my children. But that aside, we don't have a TV in our home, so that was never something that we wanted in our home. We don't like how news is driven by negativity and how you have no clue what's going to pop up on a TV at any given time with commercials and stuff like that. And so it just wasn't something that we ever wanted in our home. So without smartphones and without a TV, really our computers were things that we were utilizing. That's what our kids would watch movies on. That's what we would watch things on. And since June, we've just completely cut them out. And so our children are watching nothing except for, we have had 2 family movie nights. I'd say every other month we have a family movie night. And that's something that we've been able to enjoy. And yeah, it's a great time of snuggling up and cuddling and family bonding, but it's not our go-to for family memories and family bonding.
Yeah, and as you'll see in more videos to come, this has just opened up the space and the time for us to grow in new areas. Katie and I have grown in capabilities. We've learned new skill sets, and the children have grown in their capabilities and skill sets in ways that I don't think would be matched if we were spending that much time in front of a screen. Of course, you can learn things. Well, not of course, you do learn something every time you're in front of a screen. That's part of the danger of it, but it's not retained like it is when you're doing it with your hands, when you're reading a book and then you're applying your knowledge together as a family. And again, it doesn't even have to be hard and laborious. It can be leisurely type things, but the memories and the relational equity that's established through those times, from our experience, has been so much more substantial doing it away from a screen and outside in real life, or reading a book, or playing a game, or building a puzzle. It's become so much more substantial than it ever had been when we were spending that family time in front of a screen.
Yeah, one thing that I have really liked is our leisure in the evenings as a family. So we have a 5-year-old, 4-year-old, 3-year-old, and 1-year-old. And something that we were also finding was kind of tricky is our 1-year-old doesn't even want to watch anything. And because we're watching it on our laptop pulled up on our piano bench, it's down where he can grab it. So he'd be like running around trying to slam the computer, trying to hit all the buttons. And we were like fatigued trying to stop him from running around. And even our 3-year-old would get like bored after 20 minutes or whatever. And so something that we have done is we have read a lot in the evenings, and that's something that I think has been very special. The kiddos can knit while they read. It's slower, so it doesn't require them to look at something. They can just listen, and they can kind of use their hands, and that keeps them engaged for longer and quiet. It's also been a really sweet bonding time because Elisha works with Lawrence, our youngest, on sitting still during that time. And it's great because Lawrence is learning that self-control. We could take a break if Elisha needs to talk him through something. And that has helped in a lot of areas, knowing that our 1-year-old can sit through church, or he could sit still when I'm at a dentist appointment, or I can take him out in public and not just have him be a little holy terror running around. We found that stopping a book is a lot easier for us and less frustrating than having a movie and having to pause it and delay of game, chase Lawrence around, and all that. So it's been really conducive to teaching our children self-control and sitting still.
A lot of the practical things that we have in our life have helped, meaning we don't have smartphones, we don't have tablets or iPads, we don't have a TV in our living room or in any of our rooms. We simply have, well, right now we actually have one laptop that works, and I'm working on that for our businesses the vast majority of the day. And so that in and of itself is a way that kind of almost takes away the temptation, takes away the option, and you've been kind of forced initially to fill that then with other things. But we've really enjoyed, and we can probably talk more about it, being smartphone free, only having flip phones, having one computer that's working in the home, and that's literally our one, like our access point into the online space, into the digital realm. And of course, I know there's levels to being screen free, and we're not going to freak out if our kids are in front of a screen. You know, like I'll be working at home and I'll be editing videos, and the kids come and they'll work and they'll sit on my lap and they'll be sitting with me as I'm editing a video. And I mean, even, you know, we'll be at church, and our church is one of those crazy churches that displays all of the songs up on a screen. You know, and we don't cover our kids' eyes and say, do not look at the hymns lyrics on the screen. We can only sing the hymns from the book.
We aren't scared of screens. We are choosing to, we think that there are things that are more valuable than the screen. And I think that that's something that I realized when I didn't have my smartphone, was I realized I wasn't turning things on so much for the children, because usually what would trigger my response of, I need some time, I would turn on something for them and I would get on my phone.
Wow. And
we'd both be relaxing together with screens, and then we'd both get off, we'd both be grumpy, and we'd both not like each other. So that was really unhealthy, and I think that those things were, that cycle, they were contributing and they were kind of feeding each other. So when I stopped the cycle by no longer having my rest time be on a screen, then I was like, well, you guys aren't just going to sit there and watch something, you know. So something else that's been really enjoyable for us in the evening is creating our own entertainment. This has been more fun than I ever thought possible, but the children do a lot of recitation during their school. We work on memorizing scripture, we work on memorizing poems, we work on singing hymns, and so it has been so fun to sit around in the evening time and do those things together, and they get to show Daddy what they've memorized, and we'll go around and everyone gets to stand up and pick a recitation of their choice, whether that's scripture or a poem, or, you know, kind of like a drama. And that's just been a really fun time. We'll go around and we'll practice our hymns, and it keeps everything that we're memorizing fresh. And the kids are involved in creating their entertainment. It's very entertaining.
Not only is it entertaining and enjoyable, and it serves all the purposes times 100 that a screen would serve, I think that Katie and I came to alignment on wanting to do this because we were both able to step back and ask ourselves, do we want to have a big portion of our life spent in front of a screen? And it's funny, Katie's dad always would say, you should live your life like it's a movie you would want to watch and rewatch with your children and your grandchildren. And when I think about watching a movie, I can really enjoy a great movie, but whenever somebody in the movie is watching TV or watching a movie or watching, you know, YouTube videos on their device, it's not my favorite part of the movie. It's not an inspirational part of the movie.
You want to see people living.
Exactly. And when Katie and I made our dream boards for the year, neither one of us, you know, we didn't plan this. We both went away and made our dream boards, and neither one of us had on our dream board pictures of us in front of screens with our kids watching movies. The point in me saying that is to let you know that we weren't scared of screens, like Katie said. We were actually more excited about other things. And sometimes in order to get more excited about other things, you need to step back, take that 30,000-foot view, and ask, what do I actually want my family to look like? What do I want our life to look like? What do I want our home to look like? Come to clarity on that, get aligned with your spouse, and then implement a plan that you can execute together.
Yeah, I think that this is a lot like budgeting, where something that clicked in my mind with budgeting is it's not what you're saying no to in the moment, it needs to be what you're saying yes to in the future. Because if you really want a coffee, you don't want to say no to the coffee. But if you're saying yes to a getaway to Hawaii with that little, $4 at a time, and you're going to go with your spouse, that's a lot easier to say yes to in that moment. And I think of that with the whole screen thing. we did not want screens to be a big part of our home. When we first got married, we canceled our internet for months at a time, even though we worked online. We did a lot of things, like we were like, we aren't going to be the couple that like watches a ton of shows. Like we had all these things that were in our minds, but they were really hard to enact. And as our kids came along, it was so easy on Sunday morning to turn on Little Bear and get back in bed for an hour. And it's so easy because it was hard to say no in those moments. So what we started saying yes to were tracking our outdoor time, and that's been really big for us. So on Saturdays, we go on 2 or 3 hour hikes. It doesn't matter what the weather is. We just get outside and go on those hikes. And that's been something that we're saying yes to. And in the same way, I take the kiddos out every single day and we go sledding 2 or 3 times a day. We go to parks, we climb trees, we do all of these really fun things. And we're in a suburban neighborhood. It's crazy how when you're out every single day, you see people cutting down trees and you see people cleaning the roads. You've seen the sweepers, you've seen the snowplows, you've seen the guys taking care of all the leaves. We've seen people cutting down trees and dealing with wind damage. And it's been so cool just walking our same little routes to see all these things we never would have seen if we just stayed inside. So tracking our outdoor time was a big, what would you say?
Catalyst.
Yeah, that's it.
That was what you were looking for? I nailed it.
For eliminating screen time when I'm home alone with the kids all day. And then the second thing was tracking the amount of books that we're reading.
Yeah, those are really fun, quantifiable ways to do things that are not in front of a screen. And then similarly to that, I think Katie and I have both acknowledged the most challenging times of the day. Like, when are we most likely, based off of our history, to start a show, to put something on for the kiddos? And you identify those hours. She already talked about first thing in the morning when a couple kids are awake and you're still trying to get your head together and you're still trying to get prepared for the day. That was one of those moments where we would often just, out of the lack of a plan, put a screen in front of our kids. Similarly, between naps and dinner time is consistently a challenging time in our home, where if we don't have a plan, to enact right when the kids get up from their nap, it's so tempting to just resort to putting a screen on. And so having a plan, well, first identifying those most challenging and most tempting parts of the day, and then making plans specific for those parts of the day has been extremely helpful.
Yes, I agree. And for us, again, our go-tos have been going outside and reading books. And that is so fun. You know, reading a book requires me to sit there with the kids, but me reading a book with them is far more restful to me than me being on my phone in the other room resenting my kids and them sitting in front of a television and fighting with each other when I turn it off. And it's just been such a blessed time. And yes, I feel like as a mother, you do need some time by yourself to recharge. I think that's really important. We do have a 2-hour quiet time in our house. We're recording this video right now during that time, where our house is completely quiet. And the kids kind of divvy up that time. Our 3-year-old, he reads until he falls asleep. My daughter, she plays with her dollhouse and then she falls asleep. And my son listens to story tapes and plays Lego. And so that's kind of what we do for our 2 hours. The baby obviously naps, and it's just a completely quiet house. And I feel like I'm recharged to go into the next half of the day. So our day is not this cycle of never-ending total togetherness, but I'm also not having to rely on a babysitter that really just keys my kids up and gets them overstimulated, and then I have to deal with it.
This is something that Katie and I feel like we're just starting to scratch the surface on. Like you said, it's been really the last 6 months that we've implemented a lot of these new routines and habits into our home. And so we're excited to continue sharing some of the new insights and new kind of tricks and hacks that we discover along the way. We'd also love to hear what you're doing in your home for alternative entertainment sources from screen time, or alternative educational resources other than screen time. So comment below and let us know what you're doing in your home, because we've found that a lot of times it's the lack of ideas that ends up resulting in putting a screen on. It's not that we're not willing. It's not that we don't enjoy the alternative. Just, it's always there. You always know you can do the screen, and so you always go to it. But if you're able to grow your repertoire of non-screen activities, you'll find it easier and easier to not resort to the screen. So we're continuing to grow, like I said, our non-screen repertoire of activities, and so we'd love to hear what you're doing in your home, and we'll continue to share what we're doing in our home.
And something I do want to add on real quick is that obviously there are seasons where maybe you're bedridden or you're ill, or the potential cost of your kids kind of being worked up is worth you just being able to just lay there and not have to take care of them. So there are those seasons where you kind of weigh the negatives, the pros and the cons, and you take it. So we don't want to say that screens are terrible. If you're using them in your home in a way that serves you, that's incredible. What we found is that they were not serving us in our home, and that's why we decided to make these changes. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, consider subscribing, click the like button, and share it with anyone that you think would enjoy it. And we'll see you next Thursday.
Bye-bye.